Okay, well, this is awesome. I am so excited. I'm super thrilled to have with me today Tom Fuerst, a friend that I have made a long time ago, back in the old Haibu days in 2013 in Panama City. So it has been 11 years since you and I have shared a conversation, kind sir, and welcome back to the SQV conversation. Thank you for joining us, Tom Fuerst.
Super glad to be here.
Old friend, tell people that are watching this video about you.
Yeah, so I am a pastor in downtown Memphis, so right on 2nd Street, downtown urban church. I have been here, well, I've been at this church for almost 2 years, but I've been in Memphis for 10 and a half. We met in the Panhandle of Florida 12 years ago or so. And in the last 12 years, I've pastored, I was an associate pastor at a mega church. I planted a church. I joined that church to a downtown church. I started and finished my PhD. I have 2 books published now. So yeah, I've been really busy. I have 4 children. A lot of things happening in life.
Yeah, you've been busy, and so have I. And I can't wait to read your books. And I haven't done that yet, and I intend to do that. Are your books autobiographical, or what are your topics of your books?
Yeah, so in, 2017, I published a book on the women who are in the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew chapter 1. So I really wanted to do sort of as much as it's possible for a white guy to do this, I wanted to do sort of a more feminist kind of look at these women who, it is very rare for women to be mentioned in ancient genealogies. Right. And Jesus's genealogy contains 4 of them, and all the rest are men. And so it seemed to me like this was something that Matthew was trying to draw attention to. And so I thought, well, I'll just give it attention and I'll dive in. So I published that in, I think, 2017.
What is it called, Tom? How can people get it?
It's called Underdogs and Outsiders. Basically, it's only available on Amazon now. I think they discontinued it. Not enough people bought it, which is fine. And I'm going to probably republish it somewhere else in the future.
So we can still get it on Amazon?
Yeah, I'm sure it's still available on Amazon.
Great.
Yep. And then I am actually in the process. I have 2 books being published right now. One is a workbook on grief. And I looked at, there's like the classic stages of grief, the 7 stages, denial, acceptance, all of that. Well, it turns out that those are not linear. Like you don't just go through them and, process it. And so I wanted to do something on grief that took seriously that people's approach to grief was just not straightforward. And so I wrote a kind of, or rather I edited a kind of choose your own adventure grief workbook.
That's so cool. That sounds so useful. Yeah, that sounds wonderful. How can we get that into people's hands? Is that out yet?
Well, it is not out yet. It is currently being edited. So that will be available on Amazon when it comes out. It'll be an e-workbook. And then through the University of Mississippi Press, I will have a book coming out probably by the beginning of next year called Prophetic Peril. And this one is a more academic book. It's on the call stories of pre-Civil War African-American men and women. So,
wow, that sounds wonderful.
I'm doing lots of nerdy stuff.
That sounds so cool. I am impressed. Wow. So the grief workbook sounds wonderful. And, I used to be an editor. I probably could have edited that for you.
Yeah, you probably could have.
So if that doesn't work out.
I need a good editor.
So if that doesn't work out, whatever you got going on, let me know.
Right.
So cool. I can't wait to get that out for people. And I want to talk to you again about that. We need to do a one-on-one because I feel like there's a little bit of crossover between the projects you've been working on and the projects I've been working on. So would you say Matthew chapter 1 is your favorite Bible chapter?
Oh, gosh, I don't even know. Yeah, I mean, I love it, but it's it's a list of names. So mostly like people are going to look at it and be like, wow, that looks terribly boring.
Yeah. So what's your favorite book or verse in the Bible?
I love the Gospel of Luke. Luke's gospel is so socially oriented and socially aware. Jesus is going right toward the margins, right toward the vulnerable. He's getting pissed off over and over because the wealthy, the privileged, and the powerful are neglecting people on the margins. And, frankly, for me as a pastor, I'm well aware of the fact that most white churches in America are very individualistic and very individual oriented. And that's not a problem in itself until it begins to neglect and ignore the fact that really there are social concerns that we need to be more aware of. And I think Luke calls us to that, right? Mm-hmm. Jesus's first sermon in Luke chapter 4, he stands up before his hometown congregation, and they hand him a scroll, and he preaches from Isaiah, and he says, the captives are to be set free, debts are to be forgiven, and he goes, the hungry are supposed to be fed, and then he says, today this scripture is fulfilled in your ears. And they get pissed at him, and his hometown church tries to kill him. And it's because when we're invested in the way things are, we neglect the fact that there are people who don't benefit from the way things are.
Yes, that's so true.
Yeah, Jesus is drawing attention to that, and they don't like it. It's not surprising that white evangelicals get very upset when you start talking to them about social concerns and social justice.
You have to share the value, right? You have to make sure that they understand that there will be value, and those concepts are difficult to understand sometimes, especially when pride is involved. And, Tom, I have to tell you that I'm doing this professionally now. I'm trying to introduce empathy into the workplace, and doing so by proving the benefits of and adding empathy into the workplace. And I think you'd agree that if you're not happy at work, you're not a happy person.
Yeah, that's right.
And there's so many of, and our companies are just manifestations of our society. So if our society is corrupt, then our companies are going to be corrupt. And if you're having to link arms with a corrupt person, in an organization to feed your family, that's not a very good feeling.
Yeah. Well, and they're corrupt through and through. Everything from, you have individual toxic systems within an organization. Mm-hmm. If there is a toxic boss that is somewhere in the organization, then that means the organization has toxicity in it.
For sure.
And that means that the system has not weeded out that toxicity. So we can look at individual bad actors in an organization, but anytime there's a individual bad actor that is allowed to exist over a period of time, that suggests that there's a system that is not holding them accountable.
Absolutely. And that's really where PTO Affirm comes in. And I don't think you've had a chance to see my website yet, have you?
I've looked around on it, yeah.
Yeah. So what did you think about PTO Affirm, that certification that's just the promise that CEOs won't bother their people while they're on vacation?
Yeah, I think that in the end, one of the reasons why these organizations have toxicity and they don't have boundaries is because at the end of the day, they see their employees as cogs in the capitalist machine.
Absolutely. They're robots.
That's right. And so as long as people are robots and not humans, then that kind of toxicity is going to continue to exist, and that kind of accountability is going to, and certification that you're talking about is going to be needed. We're going to have to continue to talk about it until companies begin to see their employees as people.
Absolutely. And it's coming. 2020 taught us a lot. So what does the modern day Christian look like to you, Tom?
I talk in my church about holy love for God, holy love for neighbor, and holy love for self. And I think that our conception of holy love for God is too individualistic. I think our notion and it therefore inhibits our ability to understand our responsibilities toward our neighbors.
Yes.
And when we don't take responsibility toward our neighbors, then what we end up doing is feeling shame, and that inhibits us from actually loving ourselves. And
Wow.
by
Hold on just a second. Hold on.
yeah,
That's deep.
there's a lot there. Yeah.
That's deep. And that's what my friend Laura Lynn would call humanization, or lack of so, or dehumanization. And I know that you've studied this in theological colleges. I know that you know that humanization is very much Christ-like.
Yeah. The church spiritual masters from history would say that the goal of the Christian is to be fully human. And that to take that humanness, to be fully human, is to understand ourselves in relationship to self, in relationship to neighbor, and in relationship to God.
Beautiful.
And so there's no, anytime there is dehumanization, Christians ought to be the first people to point that out and say this needs to be corrected.
Preach it. Yes.
Yes. To say it differently, dehumanization is anti-Christ. Dehumanization is what Christians have historically called sin. Instead of sin just being like this abstract moral rule out there, sin is anything that dehumanizes neighbor or self.
Yes. Yes. So that's what a modern Christian looks like. That's cool. So what does Christ-like empathy look like?
It looks like attachment. I would say boundaried attachment. So I don't think that we can have empathy unless we have proximity. So I work in downtown Memphis. We have a large homeless population. It would be easy for me as an educated white person to remain distant from that. And I can fake empathy really well if I do that. But genuine empathy requires proximity. Genuine empathy requires community. Genuine empathy requires me looking in the face of somebody who has a mental disorder and is living on the streets because of it, and realizing that they're a human worthy of dignity.
Yeah.
And so I think empathy, let's see, Howard Thurman is an African-American theologian who was highly influential to Dr. King. He said that proximity without community is the seedbed of hatred. And so what he's saying there is that if we're just around each other, but we don't have a genuine attachment and connection to each other, then we're just going to hate each other. Because as long as we keep each other at a distance, then we're just dealing with stereotypes. But once community is established, once attachment is established, then we're dealing with real people, real flesh and blood, in all of their mixed bagness, right? They're good, they're bad, all of it. And that is where love can thrive. That's where empathy can thrive.
Yes, it's beautiful. I'm going to switch gears a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I had this experience, and I think that you can speak to it. In your congregation, have you had any chances to love on or to help caregivers? And if so, what does that look like? What do those people need?
Yeah. I think especially since COVID, caregivers are just being stressed and destroyed. They're being chewed up and they're being spit out. Yes, we have several chaplains in our church, for example. And I know a lot of clergy that have left the pastorate over the last 4 to 6 years because in constantly caring for other people, there's just, it's overwhelming. The needs are endless. I think I'm going to keep coming back to this. To care for a caregiver requires an understanding that the caregiver emotionally and physically gives everything they have to whoever they're caring for. That inhibits their energy to then turn around and give it to the places where they might want to give it, right? So they want to give care, but like it ends up stifling their ability to give their energy to things that bring them joy and replenish them.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we've got to do with caregivers is recognize that exhaustion. We have got to recognize what I think really at the bottom line is it's loneliness. When you're giving one directionally for so long and you're not getting anything in return, that's loneliness because there's no mutuality. And so what caregivers need is, I think, mutuality, people who are willing to come alongside of them and say, I recognize that because of the circumstances you're in or your job or you're caring for somebody you love, like you are giving so much. Let me give back to you without asking anything in return.
And so what do we give those people? Tangible things. What do we give them?
Yeah, I think, well, that would depend on their circumstances, but I would say, well, one thing we can give them is time, and time to process, right? So maybe they need an ear. Sometimes that's time. I'm gonna take care of this thing for you, so that you can go disappear for a few hours or a few days, unbothered, so that you can be replenished. Because I know that caring for someone who's sick is a long haul journey. And I know you were worried about it. So I'm going to help me step in for you for a few hours or a few days, whatever you need, so that you can disappear and be replenished.
That is cool. I had this happen last year. I was March 5th. He started androgen deprivation therapy, my husband, and it changed his personality to the point where he didn't want to get off the couch at night. He wanted to sit at his desk and work until he passed out. And there was certain things about our relationship that really changed. And people say prostate cancer is just like the easy cancer. You know, you'll be fine. What they mean is it's got a pretty high survival rate, but it's called the couple's disease for a reason. And so I found myself about 22 days after that change happened in him, where I was concerned about his mortality, his mental health, more so than I'd ever been. I was worried about him eating properly and drinking enough water. And I was on him because I love him. I was trying to care for him. And I didn't see myself as a caregiver. I thought, well, a caregiver is someone when you're old and you're in hospice or when you need to change the diapers. And I just emotionally was caregiving for him. And I got to the point where I had a son who's always been the one that we lock horns, and he was graduating high school and I wasn't sure if he's going to graduate. And I was so stressed out about it. And there were so many different stressors in addition to the caregiving that I was feeling that I sent him to live with his dad. And his dad, thankfully, is no longer an alcoholic. Well, he's an alcoholic, but he's a recovering alcoholic. He hasn't been drinking. It's not the very best place for him, but he's staying with his grandparents and his dad. And so I feel confident that he's getting the love and the care that he needs. And that's his other side of his family. So they love him just as much as we do. So he's there, but I needed that opening.
Yep.
In my mental course. I only have enough. In the past year, I haven't worked, but I've done this other stuff. I've had a lot of flexibility working on my business, working my business plan, working on my book. And you know, that's a beautiful thing to have that flexibility. I know that that's how you roll too, but I needed less distraction from my son, who was 18 and kind of mad at me because I was kind of being mean to his stepdad. He didn't like that. I was staying on my husband because he needed to eat. He needed to have his vitamins. I was a little bit of a bulldog. And so that was what my caregiving looked like. I got to about from March 5th to March 20th. And plus I didn't know what was happening. The doctors just said, have fun with the roller coaster that is androgen deprivation therapy. And we had no idea what that meant. We were scrapping to find information on the internet about what this meant to our life, to his mental health, to his ability to process. And I didn't understand. I just thought he was depressed and given up and lonely and didn't care about himself. And he was going to continue to martyr himself and work himself into an early grave. I said, I don't need that. I don't need that. So I said,
Right.
I need a break from this. I need a break. And he did not need me to be up his butt like that, Tom. He did not. But I couldn't help it because I love him so much. So I said, you know what? I sent you 2 chapters. Hopefully you can find them in your email, but I sent you this chapter called Equilibrium. I had to get out of my home and drive away. And I said, I don't know when I'm coming back. I took 3 bags. I took 3 pieces of luggage. I said, I'm going to go ahead and head over to Panama City. That's where you and I met. All my girlfriends are there. I said, I'm going to go get a break. And I don't know how long I'm going to stay. It might be a few days. It might be a few weeks.
Yep.
But after about 5 days, I started to come off of that serotonin overload and process some things through writing and journaling. I feel like I was processing on hyperdrive because I was journaling so much, and I was still working full time. But when I had anything come to mind, I wrote it down. I had all this stuff that was just coming to me. And it was just an epiphany of beautifulness. I mean, Tom, I can't tell you as a Christian how I was able to channel the wisdom of all my Sunday school teachers throughout my entire life, through all the church sermons I've ever been to. I was like, I have the wisdom to help myself. Although I got a tattoo about all my mermaids, because they did help me. They gave me perspective, right? They gave me empathy and they gave me perspective. But everything that I needed was already inside of me. And God just provided it. And it laid out in front of me. And after 2 weeks, I knew that journal was going to be a book. I was like, this is the things that we're not doing. And I was raised in the Air Force. You know, my first 8 years, this is how you treat people. We're going to say what we're going to do. We're going to do what we're going to say. We're going to have integrity. We're going to have service before self. We're going to have excellence in all we do. We're going to treat people right. And every year when their dental appointment comes up, we're going to make sure they get an email notification. Got to get your teeth cleaned. Wow, that's so nice. I love that. But just this corporate America greed and this flow of people being hired and fired because they're mentally distraught at work is just chaos. And our society is hurting from it. Our society is becoming increasingly stressed, and it's starting to change. I think COVID was just the last badness. I think we learned from that. So in your experience, and I thank you for listening. I know in your experience, what did COVID teach our society?
Well, and I think this is related to your question, but I want to go back to what you were saying for a second. It sounds to me like what you had, and this makes absolute sense, was a trauma response to like all of the stress, right? Like you're feeling this in your body, you have all this energy around it, you have all this anxiety around it. But you also realize like, okay, I'm working full time. I'm parenting this child. I'm also sort of parenting my husband.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because in his trauma response, he's sort of reverting to, this other state that's not, he's not he doesn't have full agency over his body. Right.
Yeah.
And so like you're carrying all of that. And so to the question, like, how can we be there for caregivers? One of the things I would say is like, I would say what we could do is say in your situation, your girlfriends provided space for you.
Yeah.
Right. This is a problem. I think with a lot of men is we don't know how to ask for space. We don't want to take up space, and we don't know how to give space. And so one, men need to do a better job with that. But two, I think what we can do is say, listen, when someone's going through trauma, yeah, they need space to talk to me, but I'm also not a professional like trauma responder, right? And so I can say, I may not be able to be the best ear for you, but I can pay for you to go to therapy, right? This can be my contribution to your healing, is to help you find spaces where you can process the trauma that you're going through.
And when you're in it, you don't even know you're in it. I didn't even know I was in a trauma response. I was, I quit my job over it. I had a panic attack one day and I was like, I can't keep doing this. I can't be your soft place and your support human and these people's punching bag. I don't have the mental energy. I don't have the soul for this. And so I quit my job, and it was really hard for a long time. It's still hard. But we're getting back on track. I'm doing some things. I've built a really strong business model. So,
but what you're talking about here is you're saying, okay, like I had this model, this rhythm for living.
Yeah.
And that got disrupted.
Yeah.
And and you're saying I was willing to make some changes. I was willing to figure out how can I create space. I'm going to ask my son to go live with his dad. I'm going to create space by going with my girlfriends and getting away for a few days. But it sounds to me like the place of work where you were wanted you to continue to work in a normal capitalist rhythm as
Absolutely.
if personal life had not just been like flipped upside down. And that's the kind of bull crap that we're talking about here. It's completely dehumanizing. And frankly, this happens to women a lot more than men. I mean, this is why women can have babies, right? And they're expected to be back in the office a week and a half later.
Super stressful. Right. Yeah.
And in the Christian tradition, what we say about this is actually that, and I don't, I'm a Methodist, so it's not like we're not the kind of people that like see demons under every rock or something, right? Like, yes. So like, don't hear me say like, oh, like there's demonic oppression. But in the Christian tradition, we recognize that these toxic systems that create dehumanization actually do have, the Bible calls it principalities and powers, right? There are these forces that are at work in the world that are bigger than mere individuals, right? And so you may have an individual good boss, you may have an individual good coworker, but if the system, the power that is at work in your organization is dehumanizing and oppressing, the individual doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And so the Christian tradition is called these like principalities and powers, and we are called to be a people who resist those, recognizing, oh, this is a dehumanizing system. Is the system inherently flawed, or does the system need to be tweaked? How does that work?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm hoping I can present some systems that will help that. And what I've decided, throughout the past year, because I was in marketing, I was an editor when I met you, but then I have my marketing degree. So I went into marketing and I did everything. I did advertising. I was an editor for some media magazines. if I could show you the mess that's behind me, what I had to do to find your publications, I had to get them all out. And I have them, there's probably 500 magazines behind me that need sorted out. I don't know what I'm going to do with them, but they got to be organized because organization is the key to success. But I was a marketing director. I was at the top of my field, and I got to the point that I was working from home after COVID, and they didn't like that. And there were systems in place that I helped put together that really did help humanize people. We had an employee of the month, and that was great. It wasn't enough, but that was something that our HR director and I put together, and I administered for 4 or 5 years. It was a long time. And I really love that. And I try always, whether I'm in journalism or I'm in marketing, to edify people that are doing good things, to recognize people so they feel more human. And in corporations, that's not easy to do because we're really busy hustling, and we got to find new ways to make sure people know that we love them. And so that's where PTO Affirm came from, because I just feel like the world has enough marketing people. Like, I don't want to do another Google Analytic report as long as I live. I know how to read them. I'm fine with it. I'll manage my own, but I'm not doing it for other people. Right. So at this point in my life, I realize that I am gifted by God with a couple different things. I have a decent singing voice. That's just about 50% of what it should be right now, because I haven't been practicing very much. That's one of the things that God gave me. God gave me empathy. God gave me a love for people, and God showed me how to do it. And I'm pretty good at organizing systems, and I'm a really good writer. So I'm using what God gave me this last year, and I'm doing something special. And I can't wait for you to read my book. I hope that you love it. I know that you and our relationship, as brief as it was special, and you inspired me. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for being somebody who's so energetic around making sure that people are humanized.
There's ways to do it, when you stop to think about things and you write them down, you go, oh, I can fix this. And that's what this whole last year has been for me. So One of the ideas that I researched and came up with, and I think it's something you're going to love because I think it's something you're already doing and you've been doing, but talk to me about mentoring and what that looks like as a formal mentoring program or informal, whether it's in church or in companies or in schools. Let's talk about mentorship and how it can impact society.
Yeah, so I am much better at the informal mentoring. I have friends who are just really talented at the formal kind of system development aspect of mentoring. My approach to mentoring comes back to the same thing over and over and over. And really, I mentioned it earlier, right? Proximity and attachment.
Mm-hmm.
That in order for me to mentor you, we need to be in each other's lives so that you can see the rhythms with which I live my life. And if the rhythms with which I live my life don't allow me time or space to have you in my life, then I can't mentor you. I just can't do it. Right. So I work in a church world where, like church world's always talking about mentoring, right? That's what discipleship is. Discipleship is mentoring.
Yeah.
But what we do is we have completely depersonalized and dehumanized it to where what it is it's the system. And usually it's an intellectual system, right? Particularly in like the Protestant tradition, it's you got to know more about your Bible, you got to know more about God, you got to know more about how the church works, and it becomes this thing about me knowing, and I'm a good disciple of Jesus if I know a bunch of Bible verses, right? And I just think that is a complete failure of the humanness of Christian discipleship. Christian discipleship, Jesus calls the disciples, the Gospels tell us, quote, to be with him. That's what it is. So they follow him around for 3 years, watching his rhythms of life.
Yeah.
And watch how does he humanize other people? How does he organize his week? How does he take time off on the Sabbath and practice Sabbath? How does he speak to people who disagree with him? What does he do to stand up for people who are being hurt? At the end of the day, how does he speak to the Romans? And in the end of the day, what does the cross of Jesus tell us about how Jesus mentors? And it is through self-giving love.
Yeah. So we have to take time out. So that would translate into a corporation for the senior members to be involved with the junior members, to hang out with them and mentor them and, have fellowship together and care about them as humans. And I think that's a huge piece of what's missing. I do.
Yeah. Bottom line, if you're not, I think this is a concrete example. If you're a person in an organization who has some clout, some privilege, some hierarchy, and you're not having meals with people lower on the ladder than you, then you cannot mentor them, right? This is the ancient tradition. It's bigger than just Christianity. But the idea is that when we share a meal together, we both sit at a table as equals, and we both have our needs being met. And that's an expression of vulnerability. And what it does is it breaks down the hierarchy in an organization. This is why I insist in my church, like anytime someone wants to get lunch or coffee with me, I'm like, yeah, let's figure out a time to do it. This is what I'm good at. So again, I said, like, I do this informally, right? I don't have a system, but I have very intentional symbolic acts of meals with people, of sharing space and time and rhythms with people.
Yeah. And there's been other pastors that I have known that have always been big on that. And I agree. Breaking bread is very important. As a marketing director, I was in charge of all internal and external communications for our corporate brand and 32 properties. And I never sat down and had lunch with my CEO. The only time I did was the time that I said, I called the lunch and I said, you know what, we need to meet for lunch. I have something I need to talk to you about. And I was telling her I was moving to the Clearwater area. We were moving from Gainesville. And it ended really, I was like, do you want a remote marketing director? And she never said anything, but we had a lunch and we connected as humans and it was beautiful. And really, I felt like as her marketing director that was in charge of a lot of aspects of her business, we should have been meeting weekly. And it just never happened.
Yep.
And I really felt discarded and not important and not part of the clique. And I thought, well, how can I possibly serve this organization when I can't communicate with her because I don't have a relationship with her? It was hard. It was really hard. And I should have resigned a long time ago, but they were paying me enough. And I couldn't find a better job. It was toxic. It's bad. 6 years of bad.
Yeah. This is a constant struggle for me too, right? Like I don't work in the corporate world, but you can even get to a place where you're so busy out of good things, right? Like you're meeting people's needs all the time. And like, but at the end of the day, it's not human for you to live at that kind of pace. That's what robots do. And it's not human for the people around you never to have time. Are you familiar with this art piece of the machine that bleeds its own oil?
Yeah. It's really, really cool. It's really, really cool. And I'll look that up and link it to this interview. That's a very cool thing. Something
it like recently died. Yeah.
I know. Say that last sentence again before you brought up the robot.
I don't remember what I said, but it
was brilliant.
The idea is essentially like if it's not a human way to live.
Yeah.
If you're the leader of an organization and you are constantly busy, that's what robots do.
Yes.
You're not human. And then it doesn't humanize anyone around you because they don't have any kind of proximity or attachment to you.
Yes. So the cause of that, and thank you for reminding me of what we just said because it brought back that thought. The cause of that hustle, is greed. Because what we do as leaders and the CEO and the hierarchy, they say, I can get 60 hours of work out of Shannon. She is a hard worker. I can pay her $70,000 a year and I don't have to hire anybody to help her. She might get fried out, but that's okay. She'll leave. And I think that's what they did to drive me out. There were times where I had help and the first couple weeks of that job, I had too much on my plate, but they want to get as much out of you as possible. There's this lean work concept that we need to throw to the curb because it's toxic and it's gross and it's frying good people.
Yep. It is fundamentally dehumanizing. You cannot have humans with lives, with feelings, with thoughts of their own, and who work in a system like that.
It was hustle, hustle, hustle every day. And it wasn't just me in the marketing department. Everybody was like that. People were clanging against each other like bad, mean robots.
Yep.
Tom, it was awful. And it's still that way. And multifamily is a really hard industry. And I believe that God he needed me to go through that. And it was just like walking through coals. But I got to the point where I realized that there were better systems and I lived it. And so, we talk about this in the Christian faith. If you tell your testimony, people might believe you and you might be able to change people.
Yeah. And I mean, right. That's what your book is trying to do, right? Is say like, I lived through this. I want to tell this story so that you don't have to live through this, so that you can realize your value as a human being, so that you can have holy love for self, so that you don't get to that, breaking point before you start drawing boundaries and saying, no, there's got to be a better way.
And it's something that bosses can read and go, you know what? Maybe I should treat my people a little bit better.
Yeah. Maybe I should treat my people better. Maybe the black ink, on the profit loss page is not maybe being in the black is not the highest goal, right?
Well, and what I have found, and if you go to the PTO firm benefits page, what I have found through researching this over the past year and really researching it for the past 30 years, because I've been in corporate America a long time, not quite 30 years, but a long time. And I know how to prove ROI because I was a marketing director. So what I've found is that when you put systems in place that honor people as humans, they perform better.
They want to be.
They lead better. They're better subordinates. They're happier. They will make you more money. And it's this weird contradiction because these CEOs are so like, hang on to what's always been. This is the way we've always done it. Well, it's not working for you. You got a revolving door of people coming in and out. That's your need. That's your sign. If you've got that, you need this.
If you have a position that can't hold people longer than 2 years, that's usually an indicator that there's some toxicity either in the position or in the system that surrounds the position.
Exactly.
I've been trying to tell churches this for years.
Exactly. So this has been great. I do want to bring up one more thing. I know our time is getting narrow, but I want to talk about one more thing because I know it's something that you and I are both incredibly passionate about, and it is really what's bound us together over the past 11 years, and that's gun violence. We always discuss gun violence on your posts and my post, and I know, and you know, that these systems and this lack of humanization and lack of empathy in our culture has created the gun problem in our country. So I want you to talk about common sense gun control and what that looks like in Tom Fuerst's America, if you were president, or if you were God. I mean, because the president really doesn't have that much power anymore anyway. So if this problem's ever going to end, how does empathy and humanization play into it?
Yeah. Okay. So a couple things. First of all, I think we have to have the humility to acknowledge as Americans that the things that happen here with guns don't happen anywhere else in the world.
Yes.
And we have this arrogant American assumption that we can't learn anything from anybody else. And we have to realize, no, they're actually getting this right. We are the number one cause of death of children under 5.
No.
It's firearms. So to use church language, I tell people all the time, an idol always eventually asks you to sacrifice your children.
Wow.
And that's how I understand. Look, I don't have a problem with Americans owning guns, theoretically.
Nor do I.
Right?
I came from a hunting culture. Yep.
That's right. I grew up in rural Missouri. Like, I don't have a problem with it. I have read books on the Second Amendment that were written by fair legal scholars who, present every side of the case. And I'm like, yeah, I understand this is a complicated subject. But at the end of the day, what the statistics demonstrate for us is that when we have better gun control, we have fewer gun deaths. So I've got to ask myself, why don't we want more gun control? And I think the bottom line is we have organizations, we have toxic systems in this country that perpetuate and propagandize us to fear of immigrants, fear of Black folks, fear of people who are different than us. And we feel a fear of the government, and we feel like we have to have guns to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we're actually hurting ourselves. We're hurting our local communities. The Tennessee legislature just passed a law allowing teachers to carry handguns in their classrooms. And I'm saying to myself, if a school shooter walks in with an AR-15 and they encounter somebody with a handgun, who's going to die? Or what's more likely, that a student is going to steal that gun?
Yeah.
And in a fit of rage hurt? And so again, I don't have a problem with people owning guns. I don't want to take guns from everybody. I just want us to recognize that we're creating these problems. And, Donald Trump, not to get political here, but Donald Trump was he said, well, we just got to get over it. And I realized that's America's gun policy. Our kids are dying and we just have to get over it.
It's crap.
Yeah. And so we need politicians. We need to elect politicians. How are we going to sit here and talk about being pro-life in the Bible Belt while the number one cause of death of children under 5 is firearms? That's not pro-life.
No.
This is just rhetoric we use to make ourselves feel better.
Thoughts and prayers, Tom. Thoughts and prayers.
Right. That's what one of my mentors says. He says, prayers is America's national gun policy.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. I'm going to share my favorite verse with you, Matthew 17:20. Because you have so little faith, truly I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you.
Love it. Love it. Thank you for your time, Shannon.
This has been amazing, Tom, and I look forward to working with you in the future. I know it's going to happen.
Would love it. Would love it.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.